There we go. Okay, this is a Local 100 Fightback Coalition Facebook live stream event. And it's an event we wanted to do for a long time now, about the science behind the COVID-19 vaccine, its development, all of the justified suspicion and concern about um, the people behind producing it, the companies behind producing it, and just the overall mistrust of the medical community based on a long history of, um, biological and scientific experiments, and a history of just racist decision making on the part of the institutions that a lot of us are counting on to solve the problem of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we wanted to draw from the experiences and the knowledge of someone who's on the front lines of the medical field for 3 decades now, I believe, Seth. And We wanted to introduce Seth Dressekie. He's a NYSNA nurse and longtime union member, a longtime frontline care provider. And Seth had a statement that he wanted to read at the beginning, and then we're going to have kind of a free flowing discussion where people can feel free to text us at 917-678-0557. Let us know you want to speak with us, you have a question or you want to comment, and we will contact you later in the program. We expect this to be a kind of wide-ranging discussion. So Seth, the floor is yours. And please, if I didn't introduce you well enough, please introduce yourself.
All right, so good evening, everybody. My name is Seth Dressekie, and as John said, I am a New York State Nurse Association nurse. I'm actually a retired nurse, I'm Jamaican, so we never retire. I'm retired from the city of New York, where I worked for 15 years at Woodhull Hospital Mental Health Center, and then with the Department of Social Services. Right now, I am a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I have my own little practice out here in Nassau County and Valley Stream, and I also work at a Medicaid clinic in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, and just down the street from Lincoln Hospital, and in East New York. I have been a nurse since 1989. I'm a retired Army officer, and anyway, that's enough about me. So I want to just talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm just going to speak some statistics. I'm reading for a statement. Excuse me if I speak a little bit fast. This usually bothers people who are not from New York, because New Yorkers are used to fast speaking, so shouldn't be a problem for us. So to date in the United States, 548,000 people have reportedly died due to the COVID-19 virus. Of that number, 15% have been African Americans, though we make up 13% of the population of the United States. African Americans as a group are 3 times more likely than white Americans to be infected by COVID-19, 5 times more likely to be hospitalized by COVID-19, and twice as likely to die from COVID-19 than their Caucasian brothers and sisters. In fact, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, overall US life expectancy dropped by 1 full year in 2020, the first time that has happened in over 40 years. Life expectancy for African Americans in the United States in that time dropped by 2.7 years. For Hispanics, it dropped 1.9 years, and for Caucasians, it dropped 0.8 years. There's a lot more bad news about this pandemic and its impact on communities of color that I'm sure that everyone here can relate to. Yet in spite of these devastating statistics, African Americans have consistently been less likely than other race or ethnic groups in the United States to say that they would take the coronavirus vaccine or have already done so. Still, there is encouraging news. According to a Pew Research poll published last week, of the majority of African Americans, 6 in 10 now say that they plan to receive the vaccine or already have. That is up from 4 of 10 in November. This, however, is still lower than all other ethnic groups. 91% of Asians, 70% of Hispanics, and 69% of white Americans have said they plan on being vaccinated or have already done so. There are many reasons for this disparity. Chief among these is distrust of the medical community, And I want to say personally how this hurts me, but I deal with it all the time as a psychiatric nurse practitioner with people coming in with depression and anxiety. And I'm trying to tell them you need to take a little bit of medication, get some therapy. And no, I'm going to tough it out. And I don't trust you guys. You're just trying to sell me medication. Still, I believe it is incumbent on me and those like me to encourage and educate our brothers and sisters who I see who are at risk for this deadly pandemic. That is the main reason why I'm here tonight with these fine brothers. I was fortunate enough, due to my job as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, to be among the first in the city to receive my vaccine. I have witnessed many vaccine sites, both in our communities of color in East New York, the South Bronx, and Far Rockaway. I have heard other brothers and sisters who have received their vaccine tell me of their experiences at these sites. The reluctance of my brothers and sisters to go and be vaccinated has rewarded people from outside of our communities who want to get the vaccine. As a friend of mine who was a social worker told me when she went to get her vaccine this past Friday morning at 6 a.m. at a community center in the projects in East New York, most of the people on the line to be vaccinated were young, white, and privileged. They try to dress down, but you can't hide the LLB coat or the fancy jeans. So that stuff just doesn't come off. And with that, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you so much, Seth, for opening the discussion. I want to leave the floor open for other coalition members to speak. Ray, you had some statistics that you wanted to share, correct?
Yeah, it's worldwide. So far, we're at over 313 million people receiving at least one vaccine dose, which is approximately 3.9%. So, and that number is taken from press releases it's from a vaccine tracker site I found, and they were taking that from press releases and from official government statistics, and that it clear right. Obviously, as expected, smaller nations are doing a better job overall, but of getting people vaccinated quickly. But it's an encouraging number already. That we just a couple of months we've already come so far.
Yeah. Also, I think we want to make clear that we understand the hatred and the mistrust that not just people of color, but people all across the political spectrum have towards profiteering, blood-sucking vampires like Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and all the rest of them. We don't like the way this rollout has happened. We think that it has been much slower because of their greed, much slower because of the incompetence of the ruling class of this country in particular. But also you see in countries like Brazil, ridiculously unchecked spread of the virus, largely because of lack of any social planning. And we could also talk about what happens when you have fascists running your country. Like we fully understand your skepticism. We fully understand your hatred of these people who have blood on their hands. But at the same time, we have to live not in a post-fact world, but we have to get back to knowing what the real facts are. And I love when people say they have an open mind and they want to be skeptical. Part of that is actually checking your skepticism against real scientific facts. And there's really no shortcut for that. And to not do that is really not being an independent thinker. It's actually being the opposite of that. Jonathan, I see you have your hand up, and Umberto's next after.
Just to add to Ray's numbers, according to the city.nyc, 24.4% of New Yorkers are vaccinated.
Okay. So.
Okay, you heard that?
Yeah, we heard you.
Just make sure I unmuted myself.
Okay. Umberto, go ahead.
Umberto, I think you're still muted.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Is he there? Umberto, can you hear us?
Yeah, you can't hear him.
Okay. Umberto, can you hear us? Can you hear us now? We can't hear you. All right.
You hear me?
Yeah, now we hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, for some reason the headphones aren't working. But yeah, my question is for Seth. And I know we talk about the vaccine, and people are worried about the long-term effects of the vaccine. But what people never speak about is the long-term effects of COVID. Like, we've only been dealing with COVID for about a year. So from your expertise and your experience, can you tell us, like, have people had long-term effects from COVID? And, what are we learning, or what are we still learning about the long-term effects of COVID? Not necessarily death, which we've had 500,000 deaths, as you said, but what are the long-term effects of COVID that we're learning about?
Go ahead, Seth. Seth, can you unmute?
Yeah, one of these days I'm going to figure out this whole Zoom thing. So that's a very good question. And first thing, I want to preface that by saying that right now we're only 1 year into this thing. And that is not, in the whole scheme of things, that is not a very long time. However, there's already been statistics that show, and experiences that show worldwide, that people who are infected with COVID-19 can end up with effects even after all the symptoms, the immediate respiratory symptoms, the fevers, the body aches have disappeared. Their lungs, some people, everybody is different. I always say this, everybody is different. There are people who, I'm pretty sure that I had COVID at the beginning of the pandemic. I had one day where I was a little woozy and I was swimming in a COVID stew in the South Bronx. So I guarantee you, I'm pretty sure I had it. And my wife had antibodies, so she had it, and we're in that proximity. So pretty sure I had it as well, but I'm fine. But other people now are still having respiratory issues. There are people who lost their sense of smell. There are people who are having psychiatric issues, abdominal issues, joint issues that are just going on and on and on. Now, will these disappear in time? 1 year, as I said, is a short period, is a short stretch of time. And how healthy were you before you were infected with COVID? Remember now that if you had asthma, if you had COPD, if you had diabetes and all these other things, that again impact our communities more than the other communities. We suffer with it a lot more. You're more likely to die or to be seriously injured by this disease. So time will tell, but yes, there are long and lasting effects of the virus. And again, if I said it before, please let me know. My kids always tell me I keep repeating myself over and over and over again. There are people who have been infected with COVID-19 after receiving the vaccine. It is not a 100% protection against the virus. However, no one has died or even been hospitalized after receiving the vaccine and then being infected by COVID-19. So it may not protect you 100% against getting the virus, but it will protect you from becoming seriously ill from the virus. And I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Seth, another question that we had was related to one of the other reasons why you don't see as high vaccination rates in general, not just with COVID-19, but with other vaccines in communities of color. And a lot of that has to do with access to medical care and also the treatment that the communities of color receive from doctors who many times have no frame of reference for these communities and the conditions that they suffer with, and have assumptions about, like, for example, Black women being assumed to be able to take more pain. Where that came from, what racist fantasy that came from, who knows? But there's a ingrained, like, cultural dissonance between the communities and what they need and the care that they receive and the access that they have to it. So if you could just speak about what role that plays in the mistrust that we see.
Yeah, I mean, just today, I do psych, and I had a patient and stuff, and I had a student with me and stuff, and I was talking to the woman about behavior that went on with her son, and I sat there and I talked to her, man or woman and stuff. And when I got off the call and I reached her and she agreed with me and she started back treatment of her son for his little psychiatric issue. And the student said to me that, if you were a white man, she would not have opened up to you or been as receptive to you as she would with you. And cultural things tell, I'm not throwing rocks. I mean, people have their hearts in the right place, but they don't have the cultural competency. I worked with many psychiatrists in Bushwick that were from Southeast Asian countries. And I remember specifically, and I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, please excuse me. I remember specifically a young black man came in one night. He was about 19 years old and he broke up with this girl and she called 911 and told the cops that he called her and told her he was going to kill himself. So they pick him up and bring him into the emergency room. And you get the cops show up at your door, drag you to the freaking emergency room. You get in there. And of course, again, I'm not throwing rocks at the city hospital, but you're in the city hospital and it's a 12, 16-hour wait before you see the psychiatrist. And I'm trying to speak to the brother. I'm like, you got to calm down, keep it easy, because if you freak the heck out, you're locked in. They take away your clothes. They put you in pajamas. And I'm like, can we just let him sit over here and talk and calm down? There's nothing wrong with him. There's this crazy person who is trying to get at him, who, by the way, called back to the emergency room and said he didn't really say that to her. But the doctor would not talk to him. And when the guy got angry and started screaming and cursing and carrying on, the brother ended up being medicated and restrained. Culture tells when you're being treated, and there is a shortage. There is a huge shortage of people who look like me in psychiatry, in medicine, caring for people and stuff. That's not the doctor from Bengalis or Russia. That's not their fault. So yeah, something needs to be done to bring more of us into medicine, into healthcare. I want to say I've received an email a couple of times in the past couple of weeks from a famous Black medical school. They're searching for Black men to come to their school and be and train to be physicians. They can't find enough Black men to do it. There's a heck of a lot of Black women, but no Black men. There's no pool, and it's not like it's getting better. Back in the 50s, they would have had how many? But I don't know the fix for that.
Yeah, I don't think there are any easy solutions to any of these problems.
Yeah. So yeah, it is an issue. And you spoke about with the pain, and I spoke about that before we got on this call, that there are studies that show, and it's in the New York Times, anybody can go look it up, that a Black person who goes into the emergency room seeking help that has pain, let's say a broken leg, he or she is less likely to be given opiates or something else to relieve their pain than a Caucasian person. This had an unintended consequence that we were not as affected by the opioid epidemic, because when we went to our doctor or whoever, he wasn't going to give me freaking Percocet or whatever else to deal with my pain. He's going to give me a couple of extra strength Motrins or Tylenols to deal with my pain, while he give the white guy the Percocet, and then the guy would end up taking the Percocet and going down that rabbit hole. So that's why we were not as impacted at the beginning of the epidemic, of the opiate epidemic, as they were. But I mean, now you got Migos and them talking about Percocet, Molly Percocet, and all this other good stuff. Lil Wayne with purple syrup and all that other good stuff. So it's getting into our community, but still not as bad as it was into their community.
Right.
So
okay, so actually we have Sean Petty joining us, who is a registered nurse member at NYSNA as well. I'm gonna call on Jonathan. Believe he has his hand up here. Jonathan, go ahead.
I have a question for Seth or Sean, or unless I assume Seth, Sean is okay, unless there's a professional title you prefer to be addressed as. One of the fears that I hear of on the road.
Hold on, we got.
Yeah, how many?
I don't know how many now. Earlier was four nurses.
Oh.
Let me just.
something in the background.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, one of the fears that I hear about a lot on the road of the vaccine is how quickly it was developed. Could either of you explain, if you can, why especially the mRNA vaccines from Moderna and what's the other one? Pfizer were developed so quickly, aside from the fact that the nature of the nature of the emergency, that it was a pandemic.
Okay, Seth, you want to go first?
So there was an interesting a piece on 60 Minutes with that. That was it. The who came out first was it Moderna. The head of Moderna, once the pandemic hit, he didn't wait for anybody to come to them to say this is what we need to try to do something. He immediately went to his chief of epidemiology or whoever creates vaccines and said we need to start working on this. And she knew somebody else who was working on this way of working with RNA and DNA to create vaccines. And you throw a couple of billion dollars at something, you can get it done. And they did. Look it up it's on 60 Minutes. And they went and they worked around the clock to develop this thing. I remember there was something I heard years ago that has stuck with me. Man used to double their knowledge every 20,000 years, then every 10,000 years, then every 5,000 years, 500 years, 100 years. Now we double our knowledge almost every 6 months. Double it. You know what I mean? You think about the iPhone and all this other good stuff. How old is the iPhone? 10 years. And now it's like a part of our life. So science is progressing rapidly. It's flying. So, it's not amazing to me. I'm not going to say it's not amazing to me, but it's not surprising to me that they were able to create these vaccines and that have shown efficacy, that have been effective. Death rates are going down, infection rates are going down. They're effective. And, people aren't suffering. So that's what I got.
Sean, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, sorry for the interruption. I just jumped on. Can somebody just summarize the question real quick?
Yeah, we were talking about how quick there's suspicion among people who have reticence to take the vaccine that these trials were rushed and that they didn't receive FDA approval. And how could you possibly develop a vaccine in less than a year? But a lot of people don't know that they've been working on mRNA vaccines for a very long time. And a lot of that previous research was retrofitted to COVID-19. But Seth, Sean, if you could talk a little more about that.
I mean, yeah, that's essentially what I was going to contribute, is that the actual basis for their ability to develop this vaccine is actually very old. In terms of the fundamentals of the science, and their trials weren't particularly rushed necessarily. The trials, I think, received a heavy amount of investment, and I think their ability to have human participants in the trial to such a large scale that it was a massively funded international effort. I think that, in general, and you guys have probably talked about this a little bit, I don't think there's any problem with people being skeptical of these kinds of questions. Like, these are the kinds of questions we should be asking. Were these, did they do due diligence? I think one of the things we have to ask is, and people should absolutely have every right to be suspicious of the motives of pharmaceutical companies, because they have done us dirty in the past. They have lied. They have concealed information. They have done all those things for profit. But the thing is, with vaccines in particular, they make money. They're not going to make their money. They have an interest in this vaccine being effective. They have an interest. In this case, their interests are aligned with the interests of making a safe and effective vaccine. nobody makes any money. They get sued if they will get sued, and they're open to massive liability if they're putting out a vaccine that that is going to harm people. And on the other side of it is that they stand to make tens of billions of dollars if they put out a vaccine that is effective and widely used. So they had every interest in making this safe and effective because they stand to make they now stand to make tens of billions of dollars. So I think when we look at how the pharmaceutical industry operates, there's bigger problems and more fundamental problems that we have to look at than whether or not they're trying to put out something that's unsafe and whether or not they're trying to do something that is above board. I just think we don't have to assume that we can't assume that they are in this for the goodness of their heart, or that they are in this. I think we can assume the scientists that work for them, some of them are very much ideologically committed to public health, but the people that run those corporations are just in it for money. And so we just have to break it down and analyze whether those interests align with the interests of public health at this particular moment, and what are the bigger problems with that profit motive in the pharmaceutical industry. And thankfully, in terms of the specific question of the vaccine, there's not a contradiction between having a safe and effective vaccine and their profit motive at this particular time.
Yeah, that's a virus we'll cure later, right, Sean?
Let's hope so.
Yeah. So Umberto, I see you have your hand up, and Seth R is right behind you. We have two Seths tonight, so we got to be careful about.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I got to pop this. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my question is basically on the correlation is not causation, kind of where people, well, I guess the news the media and the tabloids seem to prop this every time someone dies after taking the vaccine. The headline is woman takes vaccine and later they die. And that's a big problem because people are, it's fear mongering and it's falsehood. So can you guys elaborate or talk about this whole clickbait kind of headlines from these media outlets from these deaths post-vaccine?
Was that Seth R that had said that? Who was that gave that statistic about the number of people worldwide who had been vaccinated?
I think that was Ray, I think, right?
Okay. So again, like I said, was it AstraZeneca that they were saying that was causing blood clots? And it was like 5 or 10 people that they said had caused blood clots, and then out of millions and millions of people who had received the vaccine. Now, if those people had not received the vaccine, then I'm sure that more than 5 people would have died of COVID. Everything has to have a risk-benefit analysis. And I'm not saying that the COVID vaccine that they received was the cause of the blood clot. Maybe it just happened. It was an anomaly. But again, you have to look at the risk-benefit analysis. More than out of the millions and millions and millions of people who received the COVID vaccine, I'm sure that a couple of hundred, maybe thousands of people would have died if they hadn't received the vaccine, or at least been seriously injured and end up with those long-term health effects, right? As opposed to the 5 people who got the blood clots. We mourn their passing, and I'm not trying to sound glib about it, but you got to do the risk-benefit analysis. Everything, as I say to my patients all the time when I give them a medication, if they're depressed or they're anxious or whatever, oh, what are the side effects? I don't want to take any medication that's going to cause me side effects. Every medication has potential side effects. Aspirin has potential side effects. Tylenol has potential side effects. There are people that die from taking aspirin and taking Tylenol and taking Motrin. We don't hear about it. Nobody gets a whoopla and everybody stops taking Motrin or Tylenol or aspirin. We don't stop giving our kids Tylenol or aspirin when they get fevers, but people die from it, so.
I think also we have to have a balance, like vaccines. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Seth's word for it. Don't take Sean's word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Do your own research. Vaccines are the single most effective human intervention in public health in the history of the world. It's just a fact. It's a fact. Go tell people of color in Afghanistan that you don't want them to be vaccinated against any disease. You don't want them to get anti-malarial drugs. You don't want to have water treatment to purify water, just because the name of a corporation is on it. I get that news for you. Every product in the history of the world, at least in modern times, has the name of a major multinational corporation on it. Does that mean that we're going to boycott the whole world in order to avoid the potential side effects? And then the question is the side effects versus the cure. It's always a pro and con. It's always a balance sheet. It's never, the world is never that simple that nothing can go wrong if you take a certain medication. But what are the numbers of people being affected by the side effects, and what are the numbers of the people being affected by the disease? Where is the harm and where is the good in that scenario? And that's what we really need to think about. And we need to, I know it's easy to become emotional about things, but this is something that we really do have to step back and look at the damage and look at the devastation that COVID has left in its wake, and come up with real solutions about those problems. Because other than that, it's just people throwing talking points, and then all sanity gets lost at that point. Seth, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to kind of jump off on something that Sean said, and I think he was talking. I've also been making some comments with respect to, there's someone here who's expressing some skepticism about the vaccine. So a couple of us have been discussing that with him in the comment section. So, but I think Sean was talking about, if Sean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you were talking about the profit motive for the pharmaceutical companies. Is that correct? Oh, you're muted.
Sean, you're muted.
Sean, you're muted.
There we go.
Yeah. Yes, I was.
Right. But I wanted to go a step further and talk about, as a socialist, talk about the profit motive for capitalism in general, right? And I think it's important because, I consider the capitalist class in general to be an enemy. They oppress workers all around the world, and workers in the U.S. They left essential workers, overwhelmingly people of color, to get sick and die at the beginning of the pandemic. But at the same time, now there's some companies that have profited greatly during the pandemic, but overall the system is struggling because of the pandemic, and the rich and powerful would like to get this behind them as well. So it is a place where our interests are aligned, in that working people don't want to die of the pandemic, and the rich want to keep making money off the pandemic. They want things to get back to normal. So the vaccine is a part of that from both sides of it, right? There's I think it's that there are reasons why we want it, and there are reasons why they want it. Those are not the same reasons. They don't care about us as human beings. They care about us to keep their system running, and the fact that the whole global system is depressed right now. So that's, I think, one point that's important to make. And I think as more evidence comes out with respect to the vaccine, with respect to stopping the spread of COVID, not just, right, what we knew at the beginning was that the vaccine was going to play a great role in stopping people from getting sick and dying if they got it. But we're also seeing now that it's helping stop the spread of COVID. And that if we can get large percentage of the country and of the world vaccinated, then we can really make an impact in that. The problem is that if people don't get vaccinated in enough numbers, then the places where that happens are places where the virus can mutate into more and more dangerous variants. And we already see that race going on right now. And we may think that things are close to being over because the country is doing well with vaccinations, but on a global level, and even in this country, that's not the case. It really is a race. And if not enough people get vaccinated and more mutated strains come out that could break through our vaccination, then we could see surges in places again. And so it really behooves everyone to think about the greater good, that if we don't get to herd immunity through both infections and vaccinations, that we are not going to win. We are not going to win the race against this virus. We already have what the UK variant, the Brazilian variant, the South African variant, right now, a New York and a California variant. Some of those are the vaccine has more trouble with. Some of them are more contagious. Some of them are more deadly, right? And so the quicker we work to stop this now, the less that we could get to a really much more dangerous variant, right? And so if we don't step up and get a lot more people vaccinated, and whatever that critical percentage is, 75, 80%, then the long-term risks of COVID getting more and more dangerous are big. So, and the last thing I just wanted to say quickly is that with respect to, like I've been following a lot, particularly in Florida, the issue of really rich people who are not in line for the virus, bribing people and breaking laws, working with Governor DeSantis in order to get the vaccine to them, right? The rich and powerful in this country believe in this vaccine for themselves to keep themselves safe, right? And I think that's a big piece of evidence against any ideas that somehow it's a weapon to be used against working people or communities of color. The wealthy want this vaccine for themselves to protect themselves. And I can certainly tell you that privileged whites around the country are doing everything they can to get it. And Seth's point with respect to who's lining up for the vaccines in, at the treatment centers in the poor communities in the city, I think is another big piece of evidence for that.
Yes, Seth, and also while you mentioned that, let's not forget when we talk about white privilege and racist scumbags, Andrew Cuomo was, throwing people over cliffs to get his brother and his family members and his corporate cronies and the swine who he does business with to the front of the line. And when those type of people are pushing and shoving to get to the front of the line, you better goddamn well believe it ain't something that's going to kill them. It's something that's going to save their lives. Just like they're pushing to get on that shuttle to go to Mars with Elon Musk. It ain't because they don't believe in science. It's because they do, and because they know what the danger is. Seth, I want to get back to you, and then I see Ray has his hand up. I see your hand. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing that Sean said about liability. As part of the deal, when they did the what Operation Warp Speed, the government, they can't be sued for any things, so they're not liable for any damage. I'm not, I am saying we need to get the vaccine, but they're not liable for any damages that are done, at least here in the United States. So
yeah. Okay, Ray, I think you had a question or comment.
Yeah, two quick things. First was, and Moderna was not part of Operation Warp Speed, so they actually could be sued over that, and it doesn't apply to to vaccines being applied in other countries. The other is that there is one thing all these vaccines target the virus basically the same way. So what another variant that has the wrong mutation could potentially render vaccination useless. And that's a reason to not just sit back and say, we have 3 or 4 vaccines, we're good, because we've seen how much this thing mutates, and it's not done, not by a long shot. And we're still a long way off from getting, everyone vaccinated worldwide. And so just because we are, on track doesn't mean that it's going to go smoothly. We really have no way of predicting how this is going to be, where the next, variant's going to pop up and what it's going to be. I mean, it's entirely possible 4 or 5 months from now, we find one that doesn't, because these all attack the spike protein. This could be something different next time. And it could be a worst case scenario. So just to say, oh, we've got, we are where we are, we're doing all right. We're not in the clear yet.
Yeah. Okay, Sean, did you want to respond? Because I think Seth had taken off on a point that you had made earlier, so I wanted to give you.
He destroyed one of my arguments. No, no, that's I didn't know that, but yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean that's good to know. I mean, it reminds me actually of how a lot of the the entire infrastructure of this country is been completely decimated and privatized by and large, right? Like we rely on these huge corporations and their profit motives to bail us out in these situations instead of having well-funded, planned out approaches to these things. So, and then of course, when the only check that many of these that works against many of these corporations and them being able to do whatever they want is lawsuits. And so, once this pandemic hit, one of the first things that happened in New York State, which then Seth later is talking about how it happened with the pharmaceutical companies, is Cuomo gave everybody in the healthcare system immunity. The emergency powers, a huge part of the emergency powers was giving not only nursing homes, but hospitals and all licensed personnel immunity from being sued for anything that happened, because to cover up for their lack of preparedness, to cover up for the fact that they didn't have the amount of ventilators, they didn't have the amount of hospital beds, they didn't have the amount of nurses and doctors that they needed, and that they knew might be necessary to deal with this pandemic. So unfortunately, yes, there has been a lot of shielding of liability from the corporate interests at play. But I wanted to pivot a little bit to a point about, I guess, building off of some points that other people made. I think we are in a race against time around the vaccine, and between the vaccine and when this virus mutates to where the vaccine won't be effective. And that is an international problem. And the fact that our economy and political systems are organized along national lines and guarding and fighting over national interests is playing a huge role in screwing over our public health, our international public health efforts. So right now, Brazil is an unmitigated nightmare for the COVID vaccine. And it is a major incubator. Brazil could be another Brazil variant that jumps, that the vaccine won't be effective against, could be mutating right now in Brazil. We don't know, because of how much, the more it spreads, the more it infects people, the more opportunities it has to mutate. It's a breeding ground. So because of the policies of the Brazilian government, and because of the fact that we don't have any global, and frankly, because of the policies of the US government and letting this vaccine run rampant through this country for a full year, that we have had all these opportunities for the vaccine to mutate. And so it is a race against time. If we can, we do have a chance. If we can vaccinate good majorities of the world where the virus is spreading right now, we can actually prevent that mutation from happening. But it's a real tight race. It's completely unpredictable when that mutation is going to happen. And if it does, we're in for a world of hurt. Another world of hurt, another round of battle against this horribly deadly virus. And then the other point that I just wanted to make was, like, that's when I talk to my coworkers who are vaccine hesitant, it was really challenging because people, it wasn't that people were out. Some people may have believed in some of the conspiracy theories that got thrown around. But a lot of it was just mistrust and hesitancy. It wasn't outright refusal. People weren't like, I'm never taking a vaccine. People weren't like, I'm never, these are people that have taken the flu shot. These are people that have all their other vaccinations, but they were hesitant about this particular vaccine. And the thing that I tried to convey was that it's like, I think that the point that perhaps Seth made earlier is that the biggest thing that we have to stop is spread. So even if you don't want to do it for yourself, even if you don't want to do it, even if you're not worried about yourself, even if you've assessed yourself and you don't think you're in a high risk factor, the fact that you can take it and spread it unknowingly to other people, and that we can generally be part of a process, and that you also can be an advocate for the vaccine in whatever discussions and community. If you have the vaccine, you can then take that information and spread it to other people, because we actually, the fact that vaccines haven't been successfully implemented in the most vulnerable communities is a public health failure. And I think that we as militants, as socialists, as progressives, in the union movement, in the public sector union movement in particular, I think we have a positive role to play to make up for a small fraction of the failures of our overall public health system in actually doing that. I think the U.S. government has broken any semblance of trust that it had with the public over the last couple of years with all of the lying. The CDC has been lying to people for a good year and a half straight up. They've been lying to nurses, they've been lying to doctors, they've been lying to the public. So it harms the people's ability to trust them. And so when the FDA and the CDC then approve something, it's like, how can you trust that? And I get it. So we have to, we have to be in these spaces. We have to do our own research, but then we have to rely on each other, and we have to get the word out, and we have to make this part of the activist work that we do, because they're like John said, they don't have concern. They don't have ultimate concern for our health. It's like we have to be the bulwark. We have to be the people that actually make this happen. Even if their years of neglect are coming home to roost, are coming back to haunt them. And we have to be the ones to make us safe. And we have to be the ones to lead the fight to actually win the battle against this virus.
Something that you'll relate to the union movement too is so like often when workers get so fed up with all the lies of their union leaders and all the lies of the bosses and all the lies of the society in general, like a lot of times the default setting is nihilism. The default setting is, cynicism and just not believing in anything. And that can be very destructive. Like, any weapon is not as good as any other. Any step towards a different road is not they're not equal. And a lot of them can be very destructive. And the anger of the ranks and the anger of working class people in general, if it just goes out in all directions and it's not targeted and directed to the kinds of changes that we need, can be very destructive. And we have to be honest with ourselves about that, because we all feel that. We all feel the world has gone to hell in a handbasket and we don't know who to trust. And that's very real. And we need to be honest that people are right to feel that way. We actually have a caller calling in who's also in the medical field. Her name is Adina. She's my partner, and she's also a 1199 nurse. And she had a question about the hoarding of the vaccine by first world countries. So I'm going to call her right now, and we'll have her. Sorry.
Hello.
Hi, Dina.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
I understand you had a question. You had a point to make about the overall hoarding of the vaccine in first world countries.
Yes. Hello. Hi, guys. My name is Adina. And tonight, I'm listening to your discussion for Local 100 Fightback. And, you guys are talking about the COVID-19 and the COVID-19 vaccine. Tonight, I wanted to touch on a point, and talk about privilege and try to correlate it from a local standpoint to a worldwide subject. Where, basically, I'm a Black woman. I was born in Jamaica, and I was raised in the United States. So basically, what I see here is that, in the United States, people of privilege and wealthy people are basically getting the vaccine. They're vaccinating their families, and all of that. And the people of color basically are not really pushing to get the vaccine for whatever reason. Some of them are saying that, I don't have access to healthcare. I don't have transportation to get to the vaccine site, or to, have access to get to the COVID-19 to get tested, or, they're basically just traumatized about the history of vaccine, or, their ancestors, or, people in their family being guinea pigs, or, research mules, or whatever the situation is. So they don't want to take it. And other people are coming into the communities, and basically they're saying, since you're not taking the vaccine, I'm going to take the vaccine. So, or it could just be miseducated on, people of color part of it. But we also have another issue, which is a broader issue, where it's just not, the vaccine is just not in New York. It's not just in our community, but it is a worldwide issue where it is a pandemic. So everyone has it. And it bothered me about it where, I was reading an article the other day, and they were saying that the Canadians, they can vaccinate at least 5 times one citizen. They have enough vaccine for 5 citizens. The United States have enough vaccine for 4 citizens. I was watching television the other day also where in Israel, more than half of Israel has already been vaccinated. But then when we look at the developing countries, they have no vaccine at all. So then again, it comes to privilege where only people with money and wealth and power are getting the vaccine, and other people, of poorer, lower, middle class are not getting the vaccine. And it's not, it's basically not, it's not just, it's a human thing. It's a basic human right for everyone to equally get this vaccine and to equally be educated on it. And it's just not happening. And I just don't see how we're going to push forward to make that happen, especially with some of these vaccines having such strict restrictions of, being refrigerated or being refrigerated or, staying cold for a certain time. In other countries, like in Africa, the weather is different, So that is just my take on it about privilege. It's just all over from the bottom to the lowest. We see things in our neighborhood and we see things in America, but across the waters, and it's like a whole different story. And that's what I wanted to say about it.
Okay, Dina, thank you so much. I think you contributed so much to the discussion because that's a very big issue about the refrigeration of the types of vaccines that are being offered in the so-called third world and the countries that are victims of imperialism. So I'm going to let Seth. I see a bunch of hands. I see Seth.
Yeah. So first things, Adina, big up Yadi. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Cool.
Yeah, man. But privilege is not just an American phenomenon, because your prime minister got his vaccine, right? Or our prime minister got his vaccine, and all those other upper classes in there. The Dominican Republic, same thing. So the ruling classes in these countries have received the vaccine. Okay. Again, maybe I'm not as militant as you guys are. I've already read articles about that. They're looking at, I think is it the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that doesn't need the refrigeration and you only need 1 shot. But then people are talking about, but it's only 67% effective. And those that heard me earlier said that Mark Twain saying that there are 2 types of lies, damn lies and statistics. If you're interested and you want to look at a good video about efficacy of the vaccine, of the different vaccines, send me a text or an email or whatever and stuff, and I'll send you a video that talks about that efficacy, what it protects against, okay, and how it protects. The 67% effective does not mean that it's worse than something that's supposedly 97% effective. Okay. I will look for that and see if I can. I had got it on WhatsApp and I'll try to drop it in here.
Okay, yeah,
I can't.
If you can put it in the comments, we'll put it on the comments.
I don't know I'm not sure if I can. I'll look. It's on WhatsApp. It was sent to me and stuff. Okay. But I'll put it up and stuff. And it was really a very well put together video and stuff. And I was very impressed by it. I mean, it taught me a lot about epidemiology and how they look at effectiveness and all that other good stuff. But yeah. So again, somebody else had said, Sean said, or one of you guys said that it is not in the imperialist, it's not in the capitalist interest for people for poorer people or people in poorer countries to get sick. Those are the people who are driving the economic engine. We need them to work. They need them to work. So we have disorganization. You spoke about Brazil, and Brazil now is suffering more than any country in the world. Brazil used to be a place that the rest of the third and fourth world would look at to say this is what we need our healthcare system to be like when they would roll out their vaccines and all that good stuff. But then you had the fascists and the right-wing issues come in and blow the whole thing up. Much as what I don't say we had a great, we don't have a great system here. Hopefully now we'll start trending in the right direction. Much as how Trump tried to blow up our country, you know, and his minions. But anyway, so I'll look and see if I can post that video in here and stuff. But I think that, you know, it would be great if we were all equal and we could all take everything and put it out there and give it to everybody at the same time across the planet. But unfortunately, that's not the way it is. I'm an old soldier and stuff. I served in Iraq and I served in Africa working with AFRICOM and USAID. I don't know if everybody knows what USAID is, doing healthcare stuff and trying to get healthcare out to areas. I mean, there are areas that are just really, 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 really hard to reach and to get stuff out to. But I think that, you know, this is going to be a learning thing for the entire planet. So
Thank you, Seth.
I'll try to find that thing and put it in here.
Yeah, if you can put it in the chat, we'll definitely put it in the comments. Umberto and Seth had their hands up. Which one do you want to go first? Seth R.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up again with respect to why it's so important. You know, I thought it was well said. I think it was Sean who said it, with respect to even if you don't see yourself as really at risk, you know, what we know now is that COVID spreads a lot asymptomatically. People who don't show any symptoms, don't have any idea that they had it, are spreading it a lot. Young people. And the more that, and the way to stop that, the idea is if there are enough vaccinated people, then they kind of create a shield so that the unvaccinated people, if there are enough of them, then the virus can't, one person might get it, but everyone else they run into is vaccinated, or most of the people, and so it doesn't spread. And that's called herd immunity. And depending how contagious the virus it is, you need a certain percentage of people to get that. Measles, it's like 95%, you know, but COVID, we're hoping it's around 75%. But the more people who get vaccinated, the less it's going to spread and the less it's going to mutate. And one thing we've been really lucky about is that COVID has killed a lot of people, but it's not as dangerous as the flu of 1918, which they call the Spanish flu was, which killed about 7% of the people who got it. And the other thing about COVID is that so the early variant, the main one, did not affect kids very much, right? And I think that if it had affected kids more, people would have taken it more seriously, right? But there's nothing to say that a mutation of it couldn't hit kids really hard. In fact, right now we think that the one that came from the UK, which is titled B117, that variant seems to already be affecting kids more, right? And I have a 6-year-old and a 10-week-old, right? And the 10-week-old, neither of them are going to be able to get, you know, the 10-week-old is just starting to get her regular vaccinations, but neither of them are going to be able to get the COVID vaccine for a while. And I'm scared that we might get a variant that actually could hit kids hard, right? So as bad as COVID's been, we've been lucky so far. But if people don't step up and do their part for the greater good and say, because that's the thing about vaccinations, it's not like antibiotics where you take them to keep yourself safe. You take a vaccine to help keep you and the rest of the community safe. It's really more an idea that goes along with socialism. And so we have to think about everybody and get past, America has these very individualistic, you know, and we see that with Trump and the Trumpites and stuff like that. And the people punching people, employees at stores say, please put your mask on, our store requires it. And people go in and punch them or stab them or shoot them, right? So we have to try and push past that individualistic and think about the greater good. And I think it's a really important point. And you know, people with kids, you know, I've crossed my fingers so far, but I'm scared. And if we don't get enough people vaccinated, we don't know what Pandora's box we could unleash with this.
Yeah, Umberto was next. Good.
Yeah, I was gonna add on to Adina's point about global impact, and I think that's why it's important that we get vaccinated, because people are still going to travel, and the reason this thing spread is because people are traveling. People with privilege are traveling, and because of globalization, the Black and brown people of the global South, they have to work. So they work in tourism. That's kind of how this world is now. So they're being exposed, and they don't have access to the vaccine. They don't have access to a healthcare system. We're talking about Brazil. If you're in Brazil and your system's falling apart, or your system is overloaded, your ICU beds are full, then you can't get healthcare. So we have to also take into account that the impact that we as privileged people, when we travel elsewhere, the impact that we're making on the global people, and people that don't have access to the vaccine, don't have access to healthcare. And so I think it's important that, like Seth was saying, the greater good is important, and we have to understand that. Like, we have to think collectively. It's about collective thinking. It's about harm reduction and risk reduction, as Seth D was saying. It's about risk assessment. We have to lower the numbers. So we have to think about that as well. Like, do you want to travel? Do you want to do these things? No, you have to think about the impact. What you're doing is how it's going to hurt people across the pond, as Adina was saying. But at the end of the day, it's about the greater good, and if you have access, if you can get the vaccine, and get it. I mean, like I said, we've been debating this all the time, but it's like, we have 500,000 dead. We've lost over 150 transit workers, and we're still debating this. Like, it's about life or death. It's about the collective. It's about the greater good. It's about me visiting my mom, who's 70 years old. I have to worry about people seeing her and passing it on to her. Younger, healthy people obviously have less of a risk, but they can still pass it on to people who are vulnerable, and that's the thing that we have to think about when we make these decisions.
Yeah, Umberto, another thing that that it was important that you raised is that a lot of the spread of the disease, like, they constantly play the other is the person putting your life at risk card. Let's be honest that the people who spread a lot of this disease were white businessmen doing business in Asia and other places. So let's not forget about the role they played in being the harbinger of death for, a whole bunch of people, because of their role in society and what they do on the regular. And let's not even mention what they're doing in those countries to begin with. The other question that I wanted to raise was the impact that the high infection rate and hospitalization of COVID-19 has had on victims of other diseases, victims of, people who need dialysis, people who need, constant care and need to be hospitalized on a regular basis. And there just aren't the beds available to be able to give them the care that they need. And I know that I remember the consequences of that being wide-scale death from other diseases. So I want people to comment on that, Seth and Sean. But I think we have some other questions first. So if you guys can write that one down. Jonathan, would you want to hold off on your question, or you want to go ahead?
Well, actually, it's not a question. I want to add to, well, first, what you just pointed out about it's mostly white businessmen that are spreading this disease, traveling worldwide. And I originally wanted to add to what Umberto added. And Ray actually wrote it in the comments. I think it's worth sharing to everyone that, I'm Italian American, so are you, John. The Italy outbreak, yes, it started with a guy who flew back from China via a third country to avoid quarantining, and it spread even more last summer when people from Italy were coming back from vacation and bringing it back to their home country, and now they're suffering from an even worse third wave because people are getting quarantine fatigue. But like, why aren't we getting assaulted in the street? How come it's only Asian Americans? Why aren't they calling this an Italian virus? A year ago today, Italy was the hotbed for COVID-19, as well as New York City. But to add to what Umberto was talking about with travel, I think people who essential workers, people who are eligible to get the vaccine in New York City, should remember that a lot of the people who like to come here on vacation to Times Square, Manhattan, to see New York, to sightsee in New York City are mostly, and I only have anecdotal evidence. I've only seen anecdotal evidence of this, but you know, I was a pedicab driver before I was a transit worker. I've been a transit worker for 15 years, so I've seen a lot of this. That a lot of the people that like to come here on vacation are people from states that mostly consist of people that say COVID isn't real, that it's a hoax, and it's a democratic hoax, and they don't want to wear masks or take the vaccine.
Seth D, do you want to get in here on the questions we've loaded you up with?
Refresh my recollection on that question. I'm getting kind of old, so I can't one trade.
The question was some of your experiences related to the impact that the high hospitalization rates and high serious infection rates of COVID have had on other diseases like diabetes, other chronic diseases, and the consequences, the horrific choices that are often needed to be made in terms of who gets to bed, who gets
that is, you know what? I was working at a hospital in Long Island and stuff, and I remember the weekend when my last night working in the emergency room at this facility was weekend when they were starting to ramp up, and I've been meaning to. I put in my red letter of resignation and stuff because working those overnight shifts in the ER was just going to be a little bit too much of me. And I remember watching them back up those tractor trailers into the backyard there, and then they were building tents in the lobby. And I managed to go back there one or two times after and saw, I said, the back of the thing open up, and you're like, wow. Are you kidding me with the things? I think it's more the impact of what the virus had on those people than what those people's diseases had on the virus. If you had if you were diabetic, if you had such a pulmonary disease, if you had congestive heart failure, if you were obese, if you had any of these things, you were so much more at risk. And I'm telling you that brothers that my fraternity brothers and stuff that I known, 3 of them that healthy guys, but they had underlying health conditions and stuff. They were working, they were, productive members of our community, going on vacations, this and the other. And then you get a phone call, or you see a post on Facebook, such and such died. And you're like, wait, I'm older than he is, but he had an underlying medical condition. And how many hundreds of thousands of people that died like that? You know what I mean? And I think that what Cuomo's being skewered for now is the fact that he insisted that the nursing homes take back patients from the hospital who had COVID-19. So you basically take the nursing homes are just, you got all these elderly at-risk people. You and I who are healthy, if somebody we knew were in the nursing home, we wouldn't be able to go in there and visit them. But you're going to take a sick, infectious person and take them and plop them into the middle of this freaking nursing home. What do you think is going to happen? But this is what happens. I'm going to digress a little bit because somebody posted in here that Cuomo is still a scumbag. He is, because he's an asshole. He's not much different than fucking Trump. Because when you think about it, he's a narcissistic, know everything piece of crap. Why did all his higher health officials quit in the middle of this pandemic? Because he wasn't listening to them, because he thought he knew it all. And he listens to his pal, Michael Dowling at Northwell Health, who says, oh, we shouldn't be holding these patients in the hospital. We should be taking them and putting them back into the nursing homes so we can make space for the other sick people that are coming in, And what did you end up doing? You end up murdering people that are freaking in the nursing homes. You know what I'm saying? So listen, he is getting, I don't think he's a freaking sexual predator. He's a piece of shit, but he's not, I don't think that about him, but I think he's an asshole, and he's going to get what he deserves. You know what I mean? So I went off on a tangent, didn't I? But the virus impacted that more than those things impacted the virus, if I'm making any sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Seth Rosenberg, you had your hand up for a while. Sorry about that, Seth.
No, you. Sorry, you called on me earlier, but I forgot a point that I wanted to make. And I have just a couple points. I'll try to keep them quick. I thought Adina brought up a great topic with respect to the global nature of the unfairness and the racism with respect to vaccine distribution. And I think it's important because it gets back to the greater good of the whole world. And if the rich countries like the United States, and stuff like that are vaccinating themselves, but are not sharing the vaccine with the rest of the world, or places aren't getting vaccinated, then those places are places where the virus can spread and mutate and then come back to the other countries. So it's really a global problem. And I think it's a failure of capitalism at a fundamental level, that the idea that some countries can take it and invest their own resources and protect their people while other people don't get those resources and are left to get sick. And with a virus like this, it doesn't even work, right? So, and Brazil was a great example of that, and it could get worse. And I think and there's a racism built in there, because we know that the quote industrial first world countries slant a lot towards being white, or at least white in the power structure. And so I think that's one place. And I just want to repeat again, John said it earlier, that we know the history of capitalism, we know the racist inherent history of it, and within the medical system within the US. And it's important to understand that people are skeptical for reasons, but we need to identify where the racism is and not just say everything that the system does is racist. We need to back it up with evidence. And what we have here is, right, if you want to talk about where the system was racist with respect to COVID, then we know one place where it is, which is that when Trump was in office and working with Jared Kushner to develop a plan to fight COVID, they were actually going to accelerate things with respect to testing. And what did they see with the numbers? They saw that COVID was killing Black people and people of color in the cities. And they actually said, well, maybe we won't go as fast as we're going to go. Maybe we'll slow it down, right? That was reported in Vanity Fair, in The Independent, right? Now, Kushner and Trump deny all that, but it fits in with their white supremacist view 100%. So we're not saying there isn't racism and there isn't things to be angry about and to be skeptical about, but base it on the evidence and what actually makes sense. You have to actually make a concrete argument. And just finally, I think, with respect to, I just wanted to say, there is a lot of vaccine skepticism and hesitancy within the transit community. There have been a lot of discussions. And I think what we're seeing, thank goodness, is that a lot of coworkers who are skeptical are seeing that thousands of their coworkers got the vaccine, right? And that everything is okay, right? When you see numbers in transit of thousands and across the world, what did Ray say, 300 million, right? And the claims that the people made, people who were against the vaccine, who said it's going to, don't trust it, don't trust this. The people trust their eyes and they trust the evidence. And when the numbers get this big, that's how science works. And the science is overwhelming that it's safe, and that people in transit are seeing that, and and going out and the first wave of people got it, and now other people are saying, oh yeah, I think I'll get it too. And I think it's very encouraging.
Yeah. I just wanted to get to Anthony Steiniger, who hadn't really gotten in the conversation, but he's been in the comments here, and I wanted him to be able to speak to some of those comments if possible. Anthony, you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you. Can you hear me? Because I had to switch headphones.
We can hear you.
All right. I'm a layman with most of this stuff, but I will encourage people to get vaccinated. My family's gotten vaccinated, and it just makes sense. I mean, vaccinations make sense. They've been proven for centuries. We've been vaccinating people against diseases, and I took the flu vaccine. Take it all the time. I was in the military as well, Seth, and you get vaccinated. You deploy to tropical countries, and you take anti-malarials. I know Tom was in the military. He knows about this too. Anybody that's in the military, you get vaccinated before you go to certain countries, and you take anti-malarials. And I'm going to turn 50 this year, and I'm fine. I'm in excellent shape. But the talk about my comments, I was talking about the racism, behind this vaccine. I mean, behind this virus and the whole experience that we've had this past year. I mean, Jonathan talked about Wyron Italians being assaulted in the streets when, it was reported that the disease came to New York City from, Italy, from people traveling from Italy and the UK. We live in a global community, basically. I mean, people travel from all over the globe. If something happens in Bulgaria, it's going to affect, Japan and Peru and everywhere around the globe. That's just the way the world we live in, and it serves no one or any purpose or any good, and it's not going to solve any problems to do what Trump has done, where he wanted to racialize this virus and call it something like the Kung flu, and it's resulting in people being assaulted on the streets, and largely by people who are adherents to his racist, white supremacist philosophy. And that's something like that is got to stop. But there's a long history of that. It's always been that way in this country, where they always scapegoated the other. He's always scapegoated Black people. They always scapegoated. He's scapegoating Hispanics. With people taking jobs. It just goes a long list on other topics and in other aspects of our society, not just this virus. It's always been a long history of scapegoating in this country, and it's got to stop. And it does a disservice to people, and it doesn't help us solve the problems that we're facing, that all of us are facing around the globe. And everyone was saying here, the vaccine has to be distributed widely in order for it to be effective. I don't know the exact numbers, but I read an article a couple of days ago where it was like, with this, I think it's like something like 70-something% that we have to have 70-something% of the people to be vaccinated or have had the virus and still have antibodies, active antibodies. And like Seth D was saying earlier, we've only been 1 year into this, so we really don't know how long the antibodies are going to last in people who have had the disease. So it makes sense to, even if you have had it like I have and my wife has had, to go out and get vaccinated anyway. It can only help you. It's not going to harm you. It's only going to help you and enhance your protections against this virus.
Yeah.
So, my comments are really just, like I said, I'm a layman. We have experts here. We have people who've read more, and you could do your own research and read more from experts, people who are actual scientists, people who are actual doctors, people who are epidemiologists, people who do this and who have years and years of experience doing this. You can see what they have to say, and they say that the vaccine is safe. And what we need to do to get past this is to get vaccinated.
Yeah. I wanted to get back to Seth on some of the commentary here, and if any points he wanted to make. And also, Tom, feel free to let us know if you want to speak, okay? Seth, go ahead. Seth D, sorry. Yeah, you.
I didn't have any commentary. I mean, unless anybody were any questions in the comments that I missed?
No, more about the racism that's been whipped up, the anti-Asian violence.
Oh, I mean, you guys can speak as well as on that as I can. And, I mean, when I heard the Wuhan market, that this thing came out of the Wuhan market, I'm like, Wu-Tang? I had no idea. Like Seth R said, we are a global community. It's something happens in Bulgaria and it affects us here in the United States and stuff within a matter of days. It's we're a global community and stuff, and the whole world needs to be treated. And we can't scapegoat one particular person or one particular group of people. Remember before when it was the Ebola virus, remember Ebola? And there was a robust response, with USAID, with the World Health Organization. And what did dirtbag do? One of his first acts, or one of the things that stick in my flipping head, he took us out of the World Health Organization in the middle of a freaking pandemic. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, when you see the kinds of the things that this dude does, I just wish I could live to be 160 years old so I could read what the history books say about this time in our country. You know, if this country's still here in another 100 years, that we actually elected that ignorant sack of shit.
Don't hold back.
It never ceases to flippin' amaze me. He withdrew us from the World Health Organization because, of course, America first, because we're going to close our borders. And then what his health advisors advised him to close the borders. And what did he do? He ignored them. It's crazy. You cannot make this stuff up.
Well, to a certain extent, we got to acknowledge that Trump and his ability to sell false narratives and bullshit and lies and just whatever would prime the pump of his racist audience has kind of paved the path for all the disinformation we see now. Like, so everybody says, oh, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And you don't have to have any facts. You don't have to be fact checked by anybody. You can just say whatever you want and just make it up. And there's a real danger in that. And if you look at the world around you and you don't see that as a dangerous development, you're kidding yourself. It gets people killed. It gets people killed. It's just, and if you were looking to rank and file transit activists and socialists not to fact check that bullshit, you didn't know who you were dealing with, because that can't happen. I mean, we got to fact check them just like we fact check the bosses and just like we fact check the bureaucrats. But we're not doing our job. That's malpractice. Jonathan and Umberto both have your hands up. Who wants to go first?
I think it's worth pointing out there is a non-racist way to analyze the COVID-19 if it actually came from a bat from the Wuhan wet market, to analyze that notion that it came from a bat that was served as food in the Wuhan market. It is how unsanitary the wet market is, and comparing it to factory farming in this country. There's and deregulation in farming or unchecked, like I put it. I thought I was gonna keep this in the comments section, but I think it's worth pointing out here that it was actually 20 years ago. It was a mad cow disease outbreak in Ireland and England. And nobody called it the Queen's disease or a British virus. And 177 people died from that. I just found out now.
Yeah. Alberto, go ahead.
Yeah, like we were talking about, as we have a history in this country of blaming the others or black and brown people when you have an outbreak of a disease, whether it's even SARS, the original SARS or the earlier SARS we had maybe about 10, 15 years ago, and then even HIV AIDS, which at one point they were saying they originated from Africa or originated from, they were even saying Haitians brought it to this country at one point, which is really sick. And then once it got to another point where they were blaming LGBTQ people for the disease, so it's a history in this country of blaming, and usually when there's a misstep or pretty much negligence on the part of the government. So if you talk about the AIDS epidemic, how the Reagan administration dropped the ball, and that cost lives, because of that. Just like Trump denying COVID or saying it's a hoax or it's a mild flu. Like, these things cost lives, and like I said, people always going to get scapegoated, and that's unfortunately that's a history of this country, this world, always blaming the global South for things. But yeah, I didn't want to go too off on a tangent, but yeah, I think that's the main thing. Like, we have to acknowledge the history and the racism that exists, and we have to really focus on addressing the actual causes of the disease and not blame people. Like, that's the main thing.
I thought it was a great point somebody raised earlier about the food production in this country. Like, there was stories about pork, mostly pork plant workers not getting access to masks, and government guidelines that said if your mask fell in pork byproducts, that the companies, if they wanted to, could give you another mask. Like if you want to, these are some safe practices. Pretty please, won't you please do this if you like? And the racist stereotype of, oh, look at these backward people in Wuhan and what they're doing, and the self-righteousness on the part of the people who are the biggest spreaders of disease in the world by the food processing that they do on a global scale, and their agribusiness and their corporate farming and all the rest. It's really the height of chutzpah for the people who spread disease and food insecurity the world over to be all self-righteous about, oh, these backward people in Wuhan. Who created the world's largest sweatshop in China? Who created a Foxconn factory where workers decide it's a better option to throw themselves out the fucking window, and that they have to put nets on the windows to prevent people from jumping out the goddamn window because their lives are such misery thanks to Bill Gates? So if you're really mad about Bill Gates, that's what you should be mad about. If you're really mad about Steve Jobs and the rest of these parasites, these are the kinds of things you should be worried about. These are the kinds of things you should be outraged about. And that's what you should be trying to expose. Not coming up with, alternative fantasy conspiracy theories that have him stirring a witch's brew and coming up with a microchip virus to depopulate the world. Anthony, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think I'm the only one here who's had the virus and actually got sick a little bit. I just want to, when we're talking about inequalities of healthcare, I just want to contrast how my wife and I were initially treated with what happened with Donald Trump when he tested positive for the virus. I got sick March 18th of last year. I came to work in that day, felt perfectly fine. Came home around about 4 o'clock, sat down, was just sitting on the couch watching TV, trying to unwind. Had a little tiny bit of a sore throat. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, I had lost my voice entirely. That's how fast the disease started to work its way through my body. So the next day, my wife that night started feeling, a shortness of breath. And, I couldn't sleep that entire night. No matter what I did to try and get comfortable, I couldn't fall asleep. I had a headache, an incredible headache that I've never had before in my life. So we went to City MD because we had been told, we saw on the website and, on commercials, because they were putting it out, that they were testing people, that the test was available there because testing wasn't available widely at that time, and we went there and, we told them our symptoms. My wife was obviously short of breath. I had a raspy voice. I could barely speak when I was talking to the people there, the nurses and the doctor. And they said that, we couldn't get a test unless we met all of the symptoms, including a fever of, I believe it was over 102. And I didn't have a fever over 102 at that time. I didn't develop a fever until days later. But what they did was they sent me home with a cough suppressant. They sent me home with a cough suppressant and no COVID test. That weekend, we spoke to our own physician. We only went to City MD because, you know, we heard about the testing and it's convenient. It was right here. You know, it was nearby. But we went to our own primary care physician and we got different treatment. You know, yeah, it's that. Yeah, yeah, Jonathan, he just remarked in the comments. Yeah, NBA players were getting tested faster than those of us who were deemed essential workers. But you know, we went to our doctor and he prescribed, you know, a steroid and an antibiotic to prevent further infection. And my wife, you know, because she had shortness of breath and she had a slight, you know, small case of asthma, which had gotten worse due to the COVID, they gave her a nebulizer, which she had never used before. But we sat there for like, you know, for about 5 days. We were both, you know, very, you know, scared, to put it bluntly, as to whether or not this disease was going to progress further and or what was going to happen to us. And we were very sick for about 5 days. You know, we both had a fever at that time. We had developed a fever over that at that weekend. We went to a state, New York State testing site here at South Beach and Staten Island, where we finally got tested on the 24th, and we were still positive at that time. You know, and we had to wait, I believe it was like a week or so before we got our test results back. Yeah, well, my wife just overheard me. She said it was 2 weeks before we got our test results back. So, you know, when people talk about the elites, you know, because I saw in some of the comments, you know, about the elites and their treatment. I mean, it's been widely reported. It's been in the news. It's been in the newspapers, magazines, and so on and so forth, about how Governor Christie and, you know, Donald Trump and pretty much all of these people who are very wealthy, very powerful, politically connected, how they were treated when they got their COVID diagnosis. They were tested frequently, which us as transit workers and other essential workers did not have access to. You know, they were tested frequently, and when they did have a positive result, they were given drugs that were not widely available to the general public. They were given monoclonal antibodies. They were given steroids that were more effective than the prednisone my wife and I were given. You know, they were admitted to the hospitals, you know, given all of the treatment that they needed and monitored closely for their recovery, you know, and the disease progression in their body. Whereas, you know, people like me, that didn't happen. Now, when we talk about what's happening with the vaccine, now that the vaccine has been rolled out, that there's a vaccine available, you have wealthy people who are paying to jump the lines ahead of essential workers to take this vaccine. You know, not to mention that this whole time, they've been quarantined. We've been going to work every single day. You know, we've been going to work every single day. You know, and, you know, I don't even want to get into, because this is not, you know, I guess it is the forum, but it'll take way too much more time. I don't even want to get into the contact tracing policies of our agency, the MTA, and some of these other agencies, you know, where you know, right now, how many of you, all of us here that are transit workers, how many of you have been informed, you know, formally informed by a supervision or management when somebody at your terminal or your work location has tested positive for COVID-19? How many of you have been informed?
Never.
Everyone's shaking their head. No. So what type of contact tracing is that? If we still have this virus going around, people are still dying from it, and they're not informing you that, hey, you know, we had somebody on the AM shift test positive. You know, have you had any significant contact, you know, 30 minutes or more with this person in the same space or whatever? Have they gone to you and asked you that? No, they have not. So you see, there is you know, you can't really say that argument that the elites, you know, want you to take this this vaccine for some sort of nefarious purpose. It doesn't hold water. It doesn't hold water. Even while Trump, you know, I'm going to talk about Trump because he's the biggest, you know, offender here. Even while Trump was calling this, you know, saying this is going to go away, you know, it's going to disappear. Even up until just before he left office, when he was talking, you know, still trying to downplay the virus, he went and got vaccinated in secret.
In secret.
In secret. He and his wife, his family, as soon as the virus, the vaccine was made available, as soon as it was made available, he went and got vaccinated in secret. Yeah. So.
Well, the other thing, Anthony, I just wanted to bring up, like, when people talk about the rich are into population control and that they're using the vaccine as a way to do population control and kill the working class. You know, for those of you who are transit workers, think about this. We have been guinea pigs in a herd immunity experiment on a massive scale that killed over 150 of our co-workers, infected tens of thousands unnecessarily, spread the disease throughout one of the biggest and most central cities in the world. And it basically kept the subway system open as a petri dish to spread the disease 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for most of the time. And these are the same people who tell you that your cab door is a non-permeable barrier that will protect you from COVID-19. When our members try to rope off their train operator and conductor cabs to provide some kind of physical distancing, these are what your bosses told you. You want to talk about the elites trying to kill us? They're your fucking scumbag bosses. Okay, let's step back and focus on what is actually going on right now in your lives. But no, we don't have time for that. We're going to go to YouTube for advice, or Instagram, or Facebook, or wherever, and not fact check the line of bullshit that people are putting out there with no facts to back it up whatsoever. You wouldn't take this from anyone. You shouldn't take it from your employer. You wouldn't take it from a union bureaucrat who sells you lies. Why are we so quick to take it from someone you don't even know, who's not in that fight with you, who has no credibility of fighting the fights that really save our lives every day? Umberto, go ahead.
Yeah, just like the top supervisors, superintendents, or the top guys in transit were working from home while we were out on the front lines. Same thing with the health and hospital. Some of the CEOs, the big wigs, working from home. You know, so it's repeated in whatever field it is. Like the essential workers will always be on the front lines and risking their lives. And just like nurses and you know, healthcare workers were also out on the front lines. And you know, a lot of them, like Seth was saying earlier about, or Seth or the other brother, the nurse, I forget his name. He was saying how, Sean, he was saying how people are skeptical, workers, and it's like, yeah, well, they've given you garbage bags a year ago to protect yourself. They were telling you, wash this mask for 2 weeks. So you expect them to tell you, well, take this vaccine, it's going to help you. So the skepticism is understood, you know, and that's something that we don't talk about. Like, there's a history of racism, obviously, in healthcare, but there's this classism that exists where we're the labor, we're the cheap labor, we're out there, we're working, you know, we're dealing with these conditions, and we're on the front lines, and we never get, and you know, we are only when it's time for the headlines to give us some credit or call us heroes and stuff. But when it's contract time, or when it's time to take care of us, give us PPEs, you know, they're nowhere to be found. And the Feinbergs, the Foys, they're at home working at home, you know. And it's the same thing, whether it's transit, whether it's the health and hospitals, it's the same thing, you know. So it's like I said, this last 12 months has been sad. Like it's been an indictment on the healthcare system, the education system, all the systems in this country, and how they've been, you know, they've been exposed. COVID exposed these systems for the disparities and for the inefficiencies. You know, we're the top country, and we still have a system that's destitute, that's not working, so we have to do a lot of major fixing after we get past this pandemic, if it's possible.
Yeah.
Have you guys been given, excuse me for asking, but are you guys able to get vaccines?
Yeah,
I mean,
there is vaccination going on, but not everywhere. There's like 3 locations, and then for a long time we couldn't even like book appointment windows. We had to go online and they had to get back to us, and it took forever.
just like it was for everybody else.
Pretty much, yeah.
So they should, I mean, it seems to me they should just have had a set, I mean, you guys are freaking driving. They won't even give you a freaking barrier on the freaking bus between the bus driver and the freaking public who wants to spit on you and do whatever else and shit. They won't make sure that you guys are the priority. You keep this city going.
Yeah,
And it will make you guys a priority to get the freaking vaccine.
Tom Gudemeyer had literally go on a mission. It was like all over.
That is freaking tragic.
Relatives trying to get access to the vaccine.
Well, you know what? Your mayor and your governor are both sacks of shit. So
yeah. Well, I mean, in Cuomo's case, he's an outright murderer. What do you call somebody that sends elderly people who are, of COVID into nursing homes? I mean, what do you call somebody other than a straight up murderer? Is what he is.
Yeah, 2nd or 3rd degree. Now, yeah.
It's a question of degree, right?
Yeah.
So I see Seth and Ray, but we generally don't go much beyond
10 o'clock.
2 hours. But if we could get Seth and Ray, and then if Seth D can give a wrap up, and then we'll try to wrap this up. So Seth R, go ahead.
Yeah, a comment and then a question. I think transit is a good microcosm for discussing the vaccine. We know our bosses don't care about our lives, right? They early in transit, they wanted all they cared about was keeping the service running. And, a number of us warned them that people were going to get sick and start dying. And then we did. And they were just like, oh, what a surprise. We have to do stuff to mitigate COVID. We should use our pandemic response plan that we've had since 2012, right? So, but they did. But the fact is right now there's a vaccine. So for transit, they look at it as like, well, if transit workers get the vaccine, then we don't have to worry as much, right? They won't get sick. Not that we care about their lives, but we want them to keep working on the trains, right? Right now, we know there's a shortage of conductors. Any transit worker who's watching this knows there's a shortage of conductors, right? And people, and so they want to keep people healthy. So they're paying people to get the vaccine, not because of some nefarious plan, because they want to run their service, right? So just like capitalism wants to get back to normal, and the vaccine is a way to do it, right? Just in transit doesn't care about us. We're not saying they do, but they want to run their service. They want conductors and everyone to come to work. And if you get vaccinated, you get sick less. The vaccine works. We know that. Transit knows that. They're going to pay people to get the vaccine. Okay. So that's my comment. My question to Seth is, in the comments, we've been discussing with someone who's got some vaccine hesitancy, and he's brought up concerns about the WHO, although I tried to get him to be more concrete and he hasn't been. But I shared I don't think this, people have talked about the CDC and WHO making mistakes, and not just making mistakes, but being biased against workers. And one of the big issues with the CDC, I think under Trump early on, is that with respect to the advice on masks right at the beginning. And it seems to me that what happened is that basically there weren't enough masks for healthcare workers and essential workers like transit workers. They couldn't get them to everybody. And if they had said, well, to keep safe, you need to wear a mask, then people like us would have been justified as saying, well, either the transit gets me a mask or I don't have to work, right? And so the CDC giving very weak advice on that and giving incorrect advice on that early on was a very convenient thing with respect to protecting employers like the MTA, because the MTA is hiding behind that now. They're saying, well, the CDC said you didn't need a mask. That's why we didn't give you a mask, right? And so I was wondering your thoughts on that, whether you thought, one, that's a reasonable argument that the CDC, part of it was a way to keep the system running, to keep essential workers at work, even though they couldn't get the PPE that was needed, and whether there's evidence to back that up.
Okay.
So Malcolm,
I'm sorry. Could I get Ray's question in? And then I think that's the last question, I believe.
Wasn't really so much of a question. I was just going to give Seth a little information about the how they were vaccinating us. It's my understanding is, and perhaps this has gone up since I was told this, but I was told each department gets 25 slots per day for the Javits Center. And I think there's only 10 per day for, 130 Livingston and whatever, so there's what feels like a very small number of people that transit is taking care of, on their own per day. And they're largely relying on us to go on our own and find it somewhere. And I say this as somebody who got mine through transit. I think they're not doing a great job of this. I mean, I don't see why they couldn't have done their own mass vaccination site for workers on their off days. I mean, I put a question in the comments before, like, did any of us get tested through transit? And only one of us has. They test something like 15% of people. I've never seen anyone like come into Main Street and to do testing on us. The only time I got tested, I went to City MD.
They don't want to test you, and they did.
No, because
hospitals, they didn't want to test the nurses. They were like, you can. I mean, you can have a positive test, and as long as you're not feeling terrible, you can still work. Because you guys are the lifeblood. You are the arteries of this city. Mm-hmm. You carry the blood, the workforce of this city around. You guys shut down, the city shuts down. Yeah. And I think that again, this is about it's a leadership question, and I will talk about a leadership of between the mayor of the city of New York, and I don't have an axe to grind with De Blasio, okay, and Andrew Cuomo with their freaking dick match, okay, who's is bigger, fighting against each other. And the first thing, okay, so we need to take care of our healthcare workers, we need to take care of our essential workers, healthcare workers, transit workers, who's keeping the city running. You know what I mean? And I want to say they dropped the ball. I'm not going to throw rocks at your MTA bosses and stuff because they work for the mayor and the governor, So they should have made a place and say, okay, right here, this is at wherever your headquarters at, 130 Livingston Street. Everybody needs to come in here and get vaccinated. Those of us who are in the military, every year when I was in the reserves, you had to go get your vaccines. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, I'm not saying that we need to demand that you guys get your vaccines, but then you guys, here's a place for you to go get your vaccines if you want it. It should be done. You shouldn't have to get in line with the general public and fight and scrap and, try to get a vaccine. So, there's that. So, and, I say that we here, I want to say, been closing and stuff, and I'm going to say, leave it alone. So we got 6 minutes left. We're on this call, and I say, I love to use this thing. There are sheep and there are shepherds. And when I use the word sheep, sometimes you hear sheep in the context of them being meek and followers and blah, blah, blah. No, I'm not going to say that because some people are just too busy going on with their lives and they just hear things in a passing. But we're shepherds. We're leaders. Okay. We have influence and we have power. We need to go out to our sheep. We need to go out to our flock. Okay. And we need to pass the word that you need to go get the vaccine because look at this and whatever knowledge you've heard here, whatever you read, and whatever research you've done and stuff, and whatever you learn, impart it onto your family, impart it onto people. Because I'm telling you, it's crazy. You get out here and there are people that you respect and you love, and you hear the stuff that they're saying, and it drives you flipping. It just, you're like, you want to throw up your hands, So let's use our influence and our power, for want of a better word and stuff, to bring our people along and stuff and help them to get the vaccine and stuff and move on and stuff. And, this is the once in 100, and the Spanish flu was 1914. This is a once in every 100-year virus or epidemic or whatever. And, we're likely not, God willing, we won't see this again in our lifetime and stuff, and we're fortunate enough to have survived it, and hopefully that, we can go back to living life normally, and I just want to say that I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you transit workers. I know how important you are to this city and what we do and keeping us going and stuff and keeping us moving and stuff. Love you. And thank you for having me.
That the love goes both ways, of course, and with much respect and much love for how you've shared so freely with us your experiences, because there's no shortcut for actually hearing the voices of those on the front lines. Just like there would be no shortcut for us to tell the stories of what's going on in transit, there's no shortcut for you getting that message out there. But also, I want to touch on what Seth raised at the end, because I think it's important. Like, what are we doing here? Like, we're modeling behavior that we want to see other workers follow in everything that we do. In everything that we do, we're trying to show how things can be different. We're trying to show how you can view the world in a different way than the one you've been given by the bosses and the bankers and the bureaucrats. We're trying to discover where the hope is. And the hope is us. And the hope is us as workers, throwing off the baggage and the muck of ages, as Marx called it, to see with our own eyes the world we live in, and to really judge for ourselves. Is this the best we can do? Is the class that currently controls all the resources, are they fit to lead all of humanity? Go look at Sarah Feinberg and Pat Foy, a bunch of favor couriers and ass kissers and incompetent morons who don't know anything about running a public transit system. They all have blood on their hands. And these are the consequences for people who don't actually care what the facts are. They don't actually care. They don't care. What the transit system is run on is $54 billion in bond debt to Wall Street parasites. And all they care about is paying that money, because that's nothing but profit for the bankster class, for the billionaires. And so long as that money's been being paid, they don't give a shit. They'll walk over our dead bodies, and you all know that. Every one of you listening knows that. We are essential when it's fucking convenient for them. Every other time we're expendable. And, so, and also ask yourself, was one bond payment missed during this crisis? The worst crisis in the history of humanity that any of us have gone through. Not one bond payment was missed. Not one bit of interest was not paid. So the question is, if we don't take control and we continue to allow them to have control, will there still be a world for us to inhabit? That's how starkly things are posed. Will we still have unions? Will we still have health care? Will we still be able to plan anything if they continue to have their hands in the stranglehold over all the resources we need to survive? So any other last comments? Because we're going to wrap this up real soon. Umberto.
Let's not forget Pat Ford didn't blow the whistle on Bridgegate when he was working for Cuomo on the New York side of PA.
Yeah.
Same foolishness, man. These guys, they don't care about lives. They care about the bottom line. So absolutely. You guys be safe out there. And Seth, thank you. Thanks for the transit love. We appreciate it. We appreciate the healthcare workers more than anything as well. And
Seth, by the way, you're always welcome. Anytime you want to come back and impart your knowledge and wisdom. If you need help in your struggles, we're on every picket line. We're on every barricade, and we know which side to be on at all times.
All right, well, you have my number, you have my contact information. Let me know when you need me and stuff, and I'll let my leadership know and stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, appreciate you guys.
Have a great night. Everybody be safe. Right. And the comments never end. We expect to continue the discussion for a long time after the live stream.
Have a good night, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Seth. Good night, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Seth.
You're welcome.
Have a good night, guys.
Have a good night.